In this session, we're going to take a look at log on and log off tracking that's part of the security and compliance functionality in EventSentry. I'm here in the EventSentry management console with the default configuration, and I already expanded the complete tracking package that's there by default. And the second entry in there is log on and log off. So what does log on and log off tracking do? As the name implies, we're looking at log on and log off events that Windows generates. And we're talking about both successful and failed logons. And what logon tracking essentially does is it looks at logon events that Windows generates with the appropriate auditing configured, of course, and it normalizes those events and generates custom reports that you can then analyze and review. So for example, instead of just logging 4624 events, which are logged when somebody successfully logs on to a host, either by the network or a RTP or console session, EventSentry actually only looks at certain logon types and then logs the actual logons along with other metadata in a separate dedicated section in the web reports to show you who logged on to the computer, when did they log off, so it correlates log on and log off events, and on top of that provides additional insight. For example, was the user that logged on an administrator? And then you can also see associated processes that ran during that logon session. So this is what we have here. So there are essentially two main categories of log on and log off tracking. The first one is console sessions. So that's what we see here. And then we also have network logons. So to give an example, if you go into the web reports now and we navigate to features here and logon activity console, then here we see a number of systems where logons occurred in the last 24 hours. We can immediately see, if we look at this overview, that we had a total of 6 logons. They were all by a remote desktop. All of the logons were administrators, and we can see all of the IP addresses that were involved. If you click on details, well, then we can actually see the detailed logon activity on those machines. So for example, the last one that occurred here was not too long ago, about an hour ago, onto the server 2. It was a logon to a server versus domain controller or workstation. This is the user that logged on. It was an admin. The logon type was remote desktop. It's not registered as an anomaly, so that's something that can be configured in 5.1 to detect that. We see the logon ID, and if we expand that, then we can see that 12 processes ran in that logon session. The total duration of that whole logon session was 5 minutes. There are not a whole lot of configuration options for this feature. You can check this checkbox if you only want to see admin logons, so you can automatically filter all logons, and we can also filter usernames. So if there's a particular user you don't want to track, then you can do that here. It's generally not recommended, but it is an option because you can also filter usernames here. So if you wanted to only see users, specific users in this report, then you could just filter that right here. And of course, you can also go the opposite route and say, okay, I only want to track specific user accounts. And then you would go and check, select this radio button here. Now let's take a look at the other tab, network logons. So here we're looking at a variety of logons that can occur on mostly domain controllers, but also member servers and workstations. The first one tracks relevant logon failures. So when there's a logon failure, such a user logging on to a server with a wrong password, and you would see that, or an expired user account, for example, locked out user account, and so forth. Then here we have network logons, so this would be successful logons. And then here we have logons by type, other type of logons that are tracked here, and you can select essentially what type of logons you want to collect. You want to have audit failures only, success only, or both. So I set this to any to get the most data. And you can also filter out logons by computer accounts. So since, especially in large networks, those can generate a lot of volume, a lot of traffic. Then you can filter this out and uncheck this if you don't want to see that. A nice little add-on here is the additional host name reverse lookup. So if it sees, EventSentry sees an IP address, it will try to do a reverse lookup. So something that Windows does not do automatically. So then you have additional information, makes it a little bit easier to analyze those reports. And finally, you have the option to include logon GUIDs. So that's disabled by default because it doesn't really add a whole lot to the functionality and can cause the reporting to be a little bit slower. Both tabs of course, you select the database you want that data to be stored in, and also the auditing option, just like with all the other features. So here auditing is on, like mentioned already in some of the other tracking tutorials. We recommend that audit settings are actually configured in a group policy domain wide. But if you can't do that, or if you're unsure if this is not in your domain, then you can always set this to auditing on. Then the EventSentry agent will enable the necessary audit options for you. But again, there could be competition with group policy. So if group policy sets one thing, but the agent sets another. So it's generally recommended to review the documentation, be listing exactly what needs to be enabled, and set it on the GPO. So now let's take a look at the reporting that you get from network logons. So back here, we have these three sections here. So network logons. So here we just see basically all network logons. We can see differentiate between Kerberos and NTLM logons. For example, we can see those usernames here, who logged on, and so forth. So if you click into details here, then we can see that information here as well. Again, source IP address, where it came from. A little more interesting are the failures. So here we can see we only had 2 logon failures with a pre-authentication information that was invalid. So that usually means wrong password. And a really nice thing is you can always go back to the original event if you are collecting that in the database. So again, these are logs that are stored in addition to the actual raw events. So the raw events are stored in a completely separate area of the database. So what we have here is supplemental information, duplicate information in a sense, pointing to the original event. So if you click here and if you're storing it, then you can actually review the original event that was used for this specific report. Finally, we have logons by type that usually has the most information. You can see that the most data comes here from the domain controller, the vast majority here. And we can also see here what type of logons are happening on the network. This is really good for kind of getting a bird's eye view of what type of logons are occurring on my network. Are some of them potentially insecure, and so forth. So for example, we can see service logons, we can see interactive logons, network logons, what type of logon processes were used, and so forth. And you can filter down on this as well. So we can go filter down by user 32, and those are usually console logons that were occurring. So those are the 4624 events here, for example. Here you can see that this username logged on from this IP address and so forth. Going back to the console logons, something I did not show earlier is when you have multiple sessions to your host. So, you could connect with RDP and then disconnect the session, reconnect. So that information is also available. So if you click here, then you can see exactly here that somebody disconnected and reconnected and unlocked and so forth. And we have the general data here as well, how long the actual logon was. And we can also look at the processes. So not a whole lot that happened here, but here we can see the processes. If you go back to console login, I'm going to show how this works in real time. So I'm going to log on and let's see what the most recent one was. It was server 19. So I'm going to go to another one. I'm going to go back to my servers here. I'm going to log on to 22. I'm going to use the quick tools here in EventSentry that gives a link to remote desktop. So now I'm logging on. Let's open an interesting process. My favorite testing application, the calculator. And then maybe also Notepad while we're at it. And then let's exit here again. And that's all we're going to do. Now we're going to sign out again. And within a few seconds, we should see that information here. And that was just now. So we can see the logon occurred. It was just 27 seconds. So that was a very efficient logon session. Let's take a look at the processes here. We can see that the calculator was opened up, and you can see that Notepad was opened up. So this is great for security reasons. It's great for troubleshooting. It makes it really, really easy to have a general idea of what's going on your servers and workstations.